Welcome back to the Wishy Wobby Weave. I'm Alex.
I'm Laura.
And we will be talking about poisonous plants today. So, we're not your parents, we're not your spiritual leaders. Do what you're gonna do, but take everything with a grain of salt. They are dangerous. Do not handle or consume because they're poisonous.
This particular episode, we are covering poisonous plants, so we understand that poisonous plants are used within the witchy community. This is merely an educational video, mostly for us to talk about the different properties of some of the three plants that we picked for this particular episode. We'll kind of go into it a little bit, but there is the cautionary note. Everything that we are talking about today, please do not consume it, because it is poisonous. They are all poisonous, and then on top of that, they are not topically safe in in
any way.
No.
So yeah, all these are skin irritants, so even if you just kind of brush on them, they'll get you.
Mm-hmm.
First one is hemlock. We will insert pictures, of course, like we always do to go with it. And the Latin, also inserted, is Conium maculatum. Don't know if I'm butchering that or not. Hemlock is, I think, out of the three, probably, in my opinion, the most dangerous one, just because it looks like it could be an edible food. Because of the way it blossoms, because it is related to carrots. So, again, picture.
If anyone has seen like carrots growing in the ground or celery growing in the ground,
and I think chives also might have that same little flower.
I've never seen chives blossom. I've only seen it non-blossom, so I don't know if they do blossom.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree with you. I think that hemlock is probably one of the more potentially dangerous ones because it can be confused with a food that is perfectly safe to consume, like carrots or celery. So, but yes, please be very careful because your dad, he grows.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff, and he's grown celery and carrots in the past. So I sent him a picture of hemlock, and I was like, something edible grows like this, right? And he goes, yeah, a bunch of stuff. And I was like, oh, snap. So, and again, since it is a carrot, they probably grow real well in the same areas. So, take it with a grain of salt. If you're looking to forage, if you're a forager type of person, just be careful if you live anywhere where hemlock is potentially in that space. So, kind of going into a little bit of... It was always considered kind of like an evil, kind of witchy plant, just because when, during all the... When, Europe and America were all kind of, anti-witches and all this stuff, it was considered a devil's plant.
Yeah.
And I actually don't know if it was... I know it's mentioned, I don't know if in the Bible, but in a lot of Christian mythos and stuff, it is mentioned as something of the devil. So I still really want to get that devil plant.
I know, and it was also the fact that I think we've mentioned this before, but it within the devil plant, the Plants of the Devil book, I think it mentioned celery or something was folklorically considered to be associated with the devil, and they thought it went down I think it was celery. I think they thought it went down to the devil so many times before it popped up and grew.
I thought that was something else.
Are you sure? I thought it was celery. I could be wrong.
I thought that was coriander or something. I thought it was an actual herb. We'll look it up. I'll probably insert a little note right here somewhere.
But honestly, I wouldn't be so surprised knowing that apparently celery and hemlock are within the same plant family.
Right.
So, I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, if my memory is correct and it was celery.
So, yeah, it is definitely a skin irritant, so if you do see it or you do happen to grow it anywhere, don't touch it without gloves unless you're looking to get all kinds of rashes on you. Now, I was going to kind of pull this out right here because I have seen hemlock, like you've said, it is used in witchcraft in some places and in some parts. If you read something or you're creating a spell that would potentially need something like hemlock, a good substitute is tobacco.
Really?
Like the actual plant, obviously. Do not just pull out a cigarette.
Do you know why that is?
No, I don't. But I'm wondering if it's because it's tobacco is another pretty hardy kind of woody material. I'm guessing that's probably why. That, or maybe because the types of spells, it's about lessening sexual desires, chastity and protection. So maybe like just other elements that go along with tobacco kind of matched the hemlock stuff, and they just were like, substitute it that way, you know, you're not gonna irritate yourself or whatever, because all the plants that we're talking about today, you can't even, if you want to, you can burn some of them, but you can't inhale the smoke. So
I would be very, very cautious either way with any of
Yeah.
these.
So, you know, tobacco is something that a lot of people either smoke or burn.
Yeah.
So I could also see that if you're doing some aromatic, you know, trying to lessen people's, you know, bedroom antics. That might be a good idea to have around. So, do you have anything else to say on hemlock?
Not necessarily, no. I really don't have a whole lot that I know about hemlock. Hemlock is not one that I
Give
have
a lot on.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a fun story. That is
yeah.
what killed Socrates.
Oh, that's right!
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's right!
So
I forgot about that.
yeah, I didn't even know that, and I was like, are they for real? Because like I was doing a little research, and I
The
was like,
funny
really?
thing is, I actually read that particular, like, a thing about that, like, a month or two ago. I can't believe I completely forgot.
Miss History major over here.
I know! I was like, oh my god, and I just got done reading a thing about it.
Right. So, and he was old. Like he was causing so much civil unrest that they had to off this guy, right?
Yeah. I think he was thrown in jail for, like, basically the equivalent of heresy.
Yeah, he was like he was making all these kids upstarts basically. And everyone was like, "No, you're ruining society." But yeah, and I was reading like I don't know, like what translation or whatever, but it was basically that they made Socrates his own executioner because they basically just brewed it in a tea and made him sip it, and that just kind of shut you down and you just kind of went to sleep and didn't wake up. So again, poisonous plants. It was used as a death penalty at one point. It will kill you.
Do not consume.
Do not do that. Now, all of these plants have had, at some point, medical uses. Do not do that anymore, because we know better now.
Well, that's not necessarily true. There are some poisonous plants that we still use in the development of medication.
Yeah, but that's... You're not just gonna go out in the wild and eat it. There's
I would
more
not
to it.
recommend that,
Yeah,
no.
there's more to it than just oh, you know, rubbing my pits or something. Like, there's more to that.
It's just now it's much more controlled.
Yeah, for sure. What was I gonna say?
It's much more scientific.
Mm-hmm.
Measured.
Mm-hmm. Alright.
I'm sorry, did I make you forget your train of thought?
No, maybe. I don't know. Number 2 is belladonna. Atropa belladonna. Also called deadly nightshade. Deadly part being important because there are a lot of tasty edible things in the nightshade family.
Mm-hmm.
Like tomatoes, potatoes.
An eggplant.
Yeah. Anytime, now I just have that tomatoes, potatoes song stuck in my head. But yeah, so, that is why you are not supposed to eat potatoes at certain points of growth, and if they're already, like, sprouting, put that sucker in the ground or throw it out. Do not eat it.
Because it becomes poisonous at that point.
Scary note, gonna talk about that cellar story. There was a family, I don't remember what country this was in, but they were, you know, they had, like, a potato cellar or whatever. They went bad, and then they all went down to, like, go down there, I guess, to get food out of it, and they were all gassed to death, basically, because of the fumes being let off of the potatoes. So, even potatoes can be deadly if you're not, you know, if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, so for sure, deadly nightshade, do not be touching it, do not be eating it, don't do anything crazy with it. One of the reasons why it is called belladonna, though, which does mean beautiful woman in Italian, but it was named that because back in the day, people liked squeezing it into their eyeballs to dilate their pupils so they would be more attractive. Yeah.
Yeah, it was meant to dilate the eyes and therefore make the eyes look bigger. Making ladies look, which there were a lot of cosmetic things that happened in, like, older times that women would do to make themselves attractive, which was actually deadly poisonous, like mercury and stuff like that.
Lead and
If we're talking about the history of belladonna, historically speaking, I want to say, like, the Romans were kind of more well known for using belladonna or deadly nightshade as a poison. There actually have been several empresses, like Roman empresses, that were kind of attributed or known as having used poison for for means. One of them being, I want to say, Empress Livia. What was it? It was Livia Drusilla, and then Empress Agrippina the Younger. Like both of those, they were known for have used belladonna poisoning to further their ambitions. And then Romans were also well known for dipping. They were known to have dipped their arrow points in belladonna as a poison for battle and things like that. And then prior to the Middle Ages, belladonna was also used as an anesthetic for surgery. So that I found that really interesting, kind of reflecting back, like historically on belladonna. But when we're talking about like the more recent, like witchy community uses, folklorically, belladonna is supposed to be one of the ingredients used in making flying ointment, because it has a side effect of causing hallucinations, and it's supposed to, in some ways, it can induce a dreamlike state while you're awake. So it feels like you're dreaming, but you're actually not. You are fully awake. But I would not recommend trying to use, like, all of these things. I would not recommend trying to use it yourself unless you really know what you're doing, because belladonna is an incredibly dangerous poison to consume, and one of the reasons why belladonna is so dangerous is because it is very difficult to measure toxicity with it, and it is very easy to accidentally overdose on it.
Wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, so I was gonna, on that flying ointment, so it was kind of funny because we had picked other ingredients, like hemlock is also in that, and then the next one we're talking about is also in that. But, yeah, it's just kind of weird to think about. A lot of divinatory things were basically probably poisonous.
Oh, yeah.
If we're really thinking about it, so who knows? Maybe that was just your brain saying, "I'm dying! here's some pretty visions." So it's kind of crazy to think about, but not too crazy, honestly. I did kind of want to go back a little bit and discuss the Atropa thing.
Sure,
because
go ahead.
I thought that was kind of neat because I didn't know that Atropa came from anything. So Atropa is when you're looking at the Greeks, it is the three fates. They are sisters. She's the oldest sister. I think she was one of the scarier of the three, like...
I mean, all three of them were supposed to be quite terrifying.
Scary, but, like, one was the Weaver, one... I forget what the middle one did, but she was the one that actually... And I'm gonna insert, if I can find a good gif of it, of the scissors. If any of y'all have seen Hercules, the one that cuts the life string.
I
and it
thought...
just goes, boink.
Was it the Weaver or the Spinner? Like, spin the thread, stretch the thread, cut the thread.
I think one spun and then one did something with it and the other one cut. Like, there was it was all kind of related to the thread. I just forget who did what, and I don't know the other one's names.
But Atropa was the one that actually cut the thread.
And she was basically the one that decided, like, when your time was and what your time, like, what happened to you, kind of. I was like, oh my. The other thing, because you had talked about the Romans, because I was wondering, like, belladonna came from the Italian, right? Which was Roman, if you're looking back on all that stuff. And one of the other theories as to why that name came from was because the goddess of war for Romans was Bellona. So that's one of the theories. I haven't read a lot on her, actually, if I'm going to be honest.
I don't know a whole lot about her, honestly.
Yeah, I had never even heard her name, if I'm going to be 100%
I have from my Roman... I had to take a Roman Civ class as part of my ancient civilization degree. I remember her in passing, but I do not remember specifically because we were mostly doing a broad history of the Roman civilization from, like, creation to the fall. So she was just kind of thrown in there at some point, and we didn't really...
But not anything crazy?
No. Oh, honey, we covered so much history in that class.
I'm sure.
So much.
So, couple other little tidbits. it is a feminine herb. I'm not surprised. The name is Beautiful Woman, so,
Yeah.
you know. She's associated with Saturn and the element of water. So, as far as... I think, like, hallucinatory stuff is kind of why a lot of people would use belladonna. If I'm going to be honest, like, if we're looking at, like, spell work kind of stuff, it would probably be good for, like, other divinatory or, like, dream state kind of stuff.
Yes.
Probably not a lot of stuff outside of that realm, though.
Just please do not use it unless you really know what you're doing, because like I said before, one of the most dangerous things about belladonna, it is so easy to mismeasure the toxicity and accidentally overdo it and poison yourself to death.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when belladonna is still currently used in the pharmaceutical, like that proper, like, pharmacy, like the creation of medications and stuff. It's still used nowadays for certain properties, but it's because it's quite potent and it's only used in very small increments.
Mm-hmm. Is this the one that has the berries, the black ones? Why did I not write this down? I'm gonna look that up real quick, but it does have a bunch of names, like Devil's Herb, Witch's Berry. It has like a ton of names, and I think that's why. But
why it's called witch's berry?
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
that sounds about right.
yeah, one of the funny stories I kind of read was that in Christian mythos, again, a lot of this has to do with how Christianity viewed witchy stuff and the later half of everything. But it was believed that the devil was quite fond of belladonna as a plant, and you could only harvest her at certain times of the year because the devil was watching her apparently 24/7. Unless he was, of course, partying at witches' sabbats. So if he wasn't at a party, he was watching his flowers. And I was like, really think about this, right? Like, you know,
He's
like,
just sitting there
he's supposed to
watching.
be like this, like, awful, evil, terrifying creature to, like, again, Christian mythos. But he's over here like, my flowers. Like, what? I don't get it.
Everybody loves flowers.
It cracks me up. I'm just looking up that berry thing real quick. Because I think one of the fears on it is because they look really...
I do really enjoy the old Christian folklore for a lot of things.
Yeah, see.
Oh, yeah.
It's a black, tiny cherry tomato, almost. So one of the biggest things with this is that kids will pick them as berries.
Yeah.
So-
That was one of the, like,
The fears on that one, because it looks like fruit at the end of the day, and a lot of people are like, ooh,
yeah.
don't do that. Quite honestly, black fruit, unless it's a black berry, I would be cautious of. I'm gonna be honest. Black things in nature tend to not be edible, if I'm gonna be honest. Can't think of anything that is edible that's black outside of pepper. And I think pepper's a type of nightshade or something too. I don't remember. It's either nightshade or it's something else
No
that's
clue.
in that family. But yeah,
No clue.
not often do you eat black things that grow in nature.
Sorry, it's just as you were talking about all this, it reminded me, like, when I was a kid, I used to eat berries.
Oh my
that
gosh.
was fine.
But you like, I feel like if you grow up in like places with berries, like your parents would probably let you know, like, these are okay, don't touch these.
I don't ever remember my parents being the ones instructing me on which ones to eat and which ones not to. I went based off the older kids.
Oh,
Because that's one of...
somebody, right?
It's a very interesting dynamic of how things like old information gets maintained and stored in the minds of kids, and how it's passed on from like
Excuse me.
older
Sorry.
kids, so a couple of years older, and it just keeps getting passed on through the kids, and it's like the recycling of all this information.
Mhm.
That's why nursery rhymes, like old ass nursery rhymes, are supposed to be like a little time pocket.
Yeah, something that
And there's
just
actually
lasted.
a term for this, for how some of this really old information, old stories, old songs get preserved in almost like a time capsule because of the fact that it's constantly being passed down through these kids that are only just a couple of years apart, and it
Mhm.
just preserves it.
Yeah.
I just can't think of what that term is. Good?
Mm-hmm. Oh, one last thing on my end. I don't know if you had anything else, but going back to how belladonna was kind of hallucinatory, right? She was associated a lot with Circe. And so the story I thought was funny is the one that most people, if you've studied any kind of history stuff, the Odysseus story, the Odyssey, where she turns most of the men on his crew into pigs. And I was like, think about it. If you're really hallucinating, you might think you're a pig. Like, if you're just, like, out of your mind crazy, like, you know, probably. So I'm like, I wonder if she just, like, super drugged them up with, like, hallucinatories, and they were just like, oink, oink. You never know. That's probably what they were probably just walking around on hands and knees, just oinking at each other. And they're like, pigs. Anything else to talk about on that one?
No, I'm good.
Alright. And the last one we have today is, it's got a bunch of names, so monkshood, aconite, or
Wolfsbane.
wolfsbane. The Latin, I'm also kind of probably going to jabber on that, is Aconitum napellus. Again, I'm going to insert that here somewhere because I'm probably major butchering that. I'm sorry. But yeah, so we're just going to hop right into that. For obvious reasons, it's called wolfsbane because it was used, again, these are all poisonous. It was used as a poison for farmers to just get rid of their problems.
Yeah, if they were having issues with wolves eating their flocks, they would take some kind of meat, and then they would sprinkle it, roll it, or put wolfsbane inside of it and leave it out in the fields one night, and the wolves would be attracted to it, they would eat it, it would kill them. Problem solved. Which is also the origin for why, I think, it's the origin for why they believed that wolfsbane was good for dealing as a poison for werewolves.
I was gonna say, if any of y'all have read or watched the Harry Potter series, they talk about this very often when Lupin has to take his potion for his monthlies. Was wolfsbane. It's just what they call it. They didn't give it any other kind of name. So, and along with that, it was poisonous, so someone very skilled in potions making was the only person that could handle it because it was a very deadly poison. So, it kind of makes you wonder because, you know, they did not like each other.
Yeah.
And he had to make this stuff for him all the time.
If we're going further into some of the mythology or folklore going along with wolfsbane, monkshood, this particular poisonous plant, there is a mythology that wolfsbane or monkshood was created by the goddess Hecate from the saliva of the three-headed dog of the underworld, Cerberus. So I always thought that was really interesting.
And that kind of, like, I didn't know that, even though that's kind of my datey stuff. But that kind of, again, makes sense because one of her animals is the dog, and she's very closely related to the Cerberus, Persephone, Hades kind of underworld.
Well, she was involved in
family.
that story, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
But she acted as a mediator, a go-between, right? Did she?
So even with that, there's other myths where they think she was either a spouse or almost a spouse between the other two. Oh. So there's a lot of other myths where she's involved a lot more there.
Yeah.
But that also makes sense because, again, she would, her thing, one of her things is, if you're trying to do, I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but one of the things they recommend if you're trying to, like, do honorable stuff for your deity on one of their days of the year is to go, volunteer at a dog shelter.
Oh.
And, yeah, because she would kind of take in strays. Like, that was her thing, was the stray dogs that, like, were just living on the streets and stuff. So, stuff to do with wolves and dogs kind of makes sense in that notion. But yeah, so, again, deadly, do not touch it, do not eat it. I really, this is kind of like the plant that might get me in trouble someday, because I really, really, really like the flower, and I might grow it someday. And I already looked, because all these plants are highly regulated, right, by the government and stuff. I already found a website.
Why.
I already found a website that'll sell you the plant to grow. So, someday, maybe.
You're gonna be on an FBI list somewhere.
But there's
I'm just saying.
It's so cute, though.
You're gonna be on an FBI list.
It's so cute. I love it. But anyway.
They're gonna have a file.
They probably already do have a file.
What have
Not-
you been doing?
Not anything bad, but you know, I'm background checked every year by the ATF.
Oh, because of your...
Just in case I ever want to go back to it, I'm still background checked every year.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
So no touchy unless gloves, and all these plants, if you do grow them, the biggest recommendations were you cannot have pets for obvious reasons, or you can't let them outside near these plants because they're probably going to rub on them or something, and that's just going to end badly for everybody. It is highly recommended that you do not have small children around, because again, they might eat them or touch them, and that's bad.
For any of these.
Yeah, for all of these. And then the other thing is that if you have property where other people can get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if your backyard isn't fenced in, like, if you have, like if your backyard backs up to, like, a forest or something.
So we're basically talking about either a room or a greenhouse or some kind of containment system that you can lock up and no one can get in there but you, and all of your stuff is heavily regulated. You have safety procedures and precautions set up in place. Almost think of it like the CDC.
Yeah, no, you have to be really careful with that stuff.
Can I go ahead and start talking about some of the correspondences
Yeah,
while you're doing your...
go.
Okay, so when we're talking about some of the correspondences associated with monkshood / wolfsbane, it is associated, obviously, with the goddess of Hecate. It is also associated with the planet Saturn. Is there a particular element that you know of that it's associated with?
I think it's also water, and it's also feminine. So,
Not
again,
surprised.
yeah.
When we're talking about metaphysical and like what it can be used for, I can really see this, that it's good for summoning or working with directly with a dark goddess.
Mm-hmm.
It is supposed to be very good for invisibility spells. It is also supposed to be particularly good at helping you to recognize and interact with your shadow stuff. It is supposed to be very good for protection uses.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also another common ingredient in flying ointment. Gee, I wonder why.
Mm-hmm. So, again...
How do people just not immediately kill over from this stuff?
I don't know, man. Maybe that's why they all ended up in, like, insane asylums or whatever. That's probably... If you really think about it, they probably poisoned themselves slowly enough to where they just kind of lost faculties.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure that was a very small percentage of who actually went into an insane asylum.
I mean, yeah. I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying...
Historically speaking.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you're poisoning yourself enough, I'm sure
if
you're doing something to yourself.
Yeah, if people don't realize that you're actually, like, it's a medical condition, that you're actually poisoning yourself, or if it was far back enough in time that people didn't know that that was a thing, then yeah, you were probably considered insane and treated therefore.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, there's not really a lot of numbers as to how often something like this was used, so we can't really assume, even historically, like, that's why, like, villages or small towns were like, witch, because they just saw her hopping around on a broom or something, But, yeah.
Well, there is a lot of studies and a lot of scholars that believe that one of the common theories of why the Salem witch trials happened was because they were tripping on moldy bread.
Oh yeah, no, that's been a thing.
And then there's also people that there've been theories that, like, there was a hallucinogenic property that was accidentally introduced to the water system. There was, there were all different kinds of theories as to how this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the most popular theories is the whole moldy bread.
Yeah. No, yeah, but
hallucinations.
The point where I was getting at is that we do know flying ointment was a thing. We just don't know how often that was used.
That's true.
Yeah, so that could have been, like, one case, right, of people seeing a bunch of women just hopping on drugs. And everyone's like, ugh, women are witches.
I guess one of the big things to take away from this is because flying ointment is still a known of thing within the witchy community, if you are going to do anything regarding flying ointment, please be very, very cautious, regardless of whether you're making it yourself or you're getting it from somebody else, because can be...
I think they use different stuff now. Because I know I've seen it sold on certain websites, but I don't think it's
I would expect
anymore.
so, but then I do know that there are probably people out there that want to be traditional about things.
Make it old school.
Do old school. If
Yeah, 'cause I know-
anybody does anything, please, 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 please be careful.
Yeah, because one of the other ingredients in that is opium.
Yeah.
So you are gonna be tripping balls.
Mhm.
There's reasons why all that's outlawed or illegal. But yeah, so again, take all this information with a grain of salt. We like plants. I'm
Mhm.
gonna be honest, even though we can't grow a lot of them because sometimes we're not great at it.
This is purely educational. We are not
Mhm.
trying to encourage you to do anything dangerous.
Yeah. So
Please
yeah.
use safety.
So
Please use common sense.
yeah. Again, we're not in any kind of power of authority over y'all, but we're just giving you the information so y'all know it. Y'all do with it what you will. Just be safe about it.
We just think it's neat,
Mm-hmm.
especially from a historical standpoint.
Sorry, I'm just like,
You're gonna end up on an
Spade's
FBI list.
Alright, I think that wraps us up.
Yes.
And we'll catch you on the next time.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Toodaloo.
Bye.